5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello.
Hi.
Look who it is. It's the awesome Laura.
That's really cool. My face looks so really chubby in these
No, it doesn't.
headphones. Mm.
You look very Kate Bush at the moment.
Oh, thanks.
It's all right.
That's the look I was going
Out
for.
on the wire.
Lovely.
Thanks for that, Simon.
So, ladies and gentlemen,
Hello.
you may recognise Laura. She has been on the stream. How long ago was it now?
Oh, last year, maybe?
It was last year
Yeah.
sometime, wasn't it? Banging out some musical belters.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
What did you sing?
Oh, I sung. I did some drumming, didn't I?
Yeah, you did a little bit of everything.
A few bits.
I'll say the question again. What did you sing?
Oh, what did I sing? Oh,
Little Shop of Horrors, wasn't
yeah,
it?
Little Shop of Horrors. And, oh my gosh, my brain is just completely
Yeah, I can't
gone.
remember either.
Yeah, oh, we did A Whole New World. That went down like a lead balloon.
Oh, God. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that
didn't
was-
realise I forgot how high that
Yeah.
one is. Yeah. That
Yeah.
didn't work out.
No.
Hey, we live and learn.
Yeah.
So,
Hi, Mark. Homer.
hey, Homer.
Oh, hi.
So, Laura is here today in a slightly different capacity.
I am.
Because not only are you a very sort of gifted musical person, yeah,
To a degree.
but you are also a therapist and brain person.
I am.
You get right in there, have a fiddle around, and
Have a delve around.
make magic happen.
Yeah.
So, shall we talk about that then?
Let's delve in like a mastermind.
So the reason we wanted to get Laura on is we often talk about things
Rubbish.
of
We talk
we
about
often talk
bollocks.
about rubbish, about the human condition and the mind and what makes us all tick. And as you are in that field, you are the ideal person to talk to about such things.
Okay.
So first of all, tell us about what kind of therapy you do.
Right, so I am a drama therapist, which is a unique type of psychotherapy. And when I tell people I'm a drama therapist, they often get quite scared of the concept because they think, oh my God, what does that even mean? Or drama, I can't do drama.
Or do
Oh,
they
that
just
ta-
feel like you do therapy with, well, what? Like really dramatically.
Yeah, like, oh my God, you've just had a breakup. That's it. Yeah, it's something.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Why?
They just think that you're just going to go into like some Amdram performance. The best one I've had is what drama therapy is they think it's therapy for actors because they, they have such a hard time with their method acting. But no, it's a type of psychotherapy. So it utilises metaphor, symbolism, projection. So I like to use something called embodiment projection role, where you look at how it's linked to like the stages of like child development.
Right.
So embodiment is based on like the first year of like 0 to 1, like the tactile sense. And you've got 1 to 3, which is the projection, so projecting into things, and then you've got 3 to 7, which is the role and people taking on role. And so a lot of the things I do is based on kind of the early trauma. So if someone's struggling with something, we'll go and look at those early stages and use different tools to help them work through. But I also work outside a lot, so I do fires, and that's a really amazing metaphor for kids and people.
And kids love fire.
And that's part of the obviously not just a hobby. That's part. So when did this kind of structure of psychotherapy start? Like,
What, as in the drama therapy stuff? So it kind of came to this country from America, of all places, in the 70s, and then kind of hit really in the 80s. And it was kind of in NHS settings. And then it's kind of broadened now. You don't really get many NHS drama therapists anymore, or arts therapists, because arts is music, drama and art therapy all come under the umbrella of arts therapists. And we just kind of work in charities, or I'm self-employed, so I work for a few different people and myself, And yeah, it's just helping and supporting people. That's non-direct as well. So if you've got people that don't like talking about their things directly, you can use the metaphor or the symbolism or the projection to help people.
Right, so
work through
I
stuff.
don't understand that.
Right.
Can you explain that, please?
So
Can you give like a for
yes,
instance?
I can give you a vignette. So I have some clients that really struggle to talk. So they really struggle with eye contact. They really struggle to even talk about how their day was. So I put a pot of slime out in front of them, or we make slime, and suddenly they're able to talk because they've got something to avert their energy to. They've got something that can... and slime is great because it's very dexterous. You can just move it about and it helps with kind of that flexibility, and stops the rigidness that, you know, the conformity of a clinical setting can...
So how does that actually manifest itself? Is it that because they have something, it's like a third person in the room, or like another subject, it doesn't feel so direct, or how exactly?
Having a distraction.
Yeah,
I suppose.
but it's linked to self-soothing. So if you think about like a baby, so it's like the embodiment stuff of a baby would either suck a thumb or suck a dummy, or
You often see people doing this. you
or
know.
they'll do
They'll
that,
rub
or they
their-
might have like a stone in their pocket or something, or the people always have all these idiosyncrasies that we don't really pick up on, but it's for them to kind of dispel or to put their energies into something that feels like a distraction. So that's embodiment. And then projection is, so I use different objects where people will choose an object and place it somewhere, and usually when I'm working with kids that or adults that struggle with understanding social situations, I might use, like I used storytelling stones the other day, where I might place them in the centre and then use the different objects around to show like level of distance or how something looks, because a lot of the people I work with are neurodiverse and they struggle with what's happening internally to get it out, to see it visually externally. So I help them see things in an external capacity.
Are these kind of prescribed methodologies, or are these things you develop as you go?
Both, I'd say.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think it's a mix. Yeah, I've kind of adapted my own way of thinking, but based on drama therapy models that I've learnt when I was training.
So they may have a particular way of doing it, and then you adapt it and go, well, I think we could do the same functionality in a different sort of way.
I find a similar thing with teaching.
Yes.
That if you, and you know, because you've had lessons with me, it's if you find that a certain angle doesn't work, then you try different approaches, as you say, different metaphors, different sort of shapes of things, and until you find the thing that resonates and clicks, and then that gives you something you can work from.
Yeah, and it won't work for all people. So some people won't even want to like talk. I mean, some people just will want to talk directly about things, but then you'll still find that there's metaphors within something they'll say, and you'll kind of pick up on that at the end of something. I mean, the reason I like working with fire so much is that it almost becomes like a mirror of the person that's making it. So
can you explain the fire, how the fire thing works?
So I really enjoy working out in nature, and that's what I specialised in when I was at uni, because I feel so connected to the importance of it. And with fire, you see people really struggling to get it going, and you can tell a lot by the way in which, like, if they're really frustrated, or it's like the fire gives you back what you're missing or what you need rather than what you want. So I've got kids that will always like try and get the sparkle to go, and they can't get it to go, and then suddenly it will either work for them or it won't, or they haven't done the preparation around it. So they've got it going, and then they've got no other preparation, so they've got no kindling or anything else.
So would you mind just explaining that a bit more? So is it a case of like a bonfire type of
thing? So it's like a little bowl, like a fire bowl usually, and then you've got a bit of cotton in there, and then you've got a flint and steel, and they've got to try and get it to go. And even the action of using the flint and steel, I always say to people, you've got to utilise your anger. And lots of kids come to me with anger problems but never want to talk about their anger. So I'm like, if you're feeling frustrated or annoyed or frustrated about something, just imagine, I always say, just imagine there's a bit of like poo stuck on there, and you've got to scrape it off, and then suddenly they're like, oh my god, I can do it. And then they're harnessing that thing that they're frightened of to actually use it for good. So then they get their sparks going, and then they're able to get their fire going. But then often, if they haven't done the prep around it, then it goes out very quickly, and it shows a lot about their lack of resilience or their lack of patience and things. So then you then have to help them, support them in building up something that means that they've got more resilience of keeping a fire going by prepping and thinking for the next steps ahead and things like that.
Almost sounds like when people do team building exercises with like work and things like that to get like cohesiveness in a group and stuff.
Yeah, but it's kind of done in a very kind of, I find it quite primal, because you go back to kind of, you know, when man make fire, and it's kind
and
of.
You have mentioned poo as well, so poo and fire.
Yeah,
how more primal can you get?
Exactly, and it's that kind of that basic need. And you were talking about that on the last podcast, you know, about your basic needs, that the Maslow's hierarchy of needs: food, warmth, shelter, and getting that warmth there. And you see people when they really struggle to get that basic need met, how they get frustrated, but when they get it and they kind of learn that tool, it kind of manifests into other self-esteem, confidence things.
So how does that? So if you're looking at something that's kind of you're looking at that instance, how do you relate that to those other areas?
So I'm constantly reflecting and analysing how someone's doing something, and I don't really know how to describe it. I think it's like such an unconscious thing for me now that
it kind of innate in you.
It just happens so naturally in that. So I've got a kid at the moment who's got ADHD, who's just full steam ahead all the time, and he was just so desperate to get his fire to go on the first time, but we didn't have all the tools and resources. But what he needed was to learn patience, and so the whole time he was trying to get it to work, but we didn't have like the cotton that week because it would run out. So he had to learn how to be patient for a whole week, which is something that he's not very good at. And then in the next session, he just was like, right, I've got the cotton, we're going to do it. And it was like, but if you do that, that's gonna give you what you want. But it's
for
not,
a brief moment.
Yeah, but only for that brief moment. So it gave him that thinking time. And lots of people with ADHD, especially within boys, are risk takers and therefore don't think about the consequences. So it's trying to build up like the receptors and set up new neurological pathways in the brain for him to then take steps that will help him going forward into adulthood.
So I find that a really interesting thought. Do you mind if I just ask about that?
Yeah, I've got a question after you finish.
Oh, go on, you go.
No, you go.
No,
I insist.
Sorry. So that's really interesting. So you're trying to set up a neural pathway. Now, neural pathways, as far as my understanding goes, take a while to set up. You have to do something. So famously, they said like 7 to 11 times, and then after that, between that 7 and 11, you actually start to assimilate, and that starts to create the neural pathway.
Yes.
So you're hoping that develops that, but then there's also neural pathways set innate in us, in our characteristics and our personality. How much of that, when that changes, is going to last, or will just, again, if the inclination is to act and damn the consequences, is going to reset up a different neural pathway that will just take it back to step one again?
That's a really hard thing to measure, and that's why lots of
if you can measure that and get back to me.
Yeah, I will do. With some quantitative data, I'll do a bit of research on that. I mean, the sessions I have, I try to do for longer periods of time, because you've got to establish a relationship within the first few, and then you've got to get those things to become established. Yeah. And I've had a client whereby we've done a piece of work, he was really struggling with transitions. We got to a point where he felt more comfortable with transitions. We then had a break for 2 months, went back straight to square one again. Yeah. So it's hard to but it came back quicker the second time round. But the thing is, I find if you only do work with one member of a family, you're basically sending them back in with nobody else doing the
context still setting it back. Yeah.
So that's why I do more systemic work now, where I'm working with all the puzzle pieces so that everybody's on the same page and having their own needs looked at, assessed, worked through, so that they can make basically, holistic changes
within the environment.
Within a system.
Sorry, I've got to say, your headphones are slowly sliding forward.
They're sliding off. There we go. Mike, you had a question.
I did.
Yes.
Yeah, so you told me that you work with different groups of people. So
Yes.
you work with people who've had trauma, you work with families, you work with neurodivergent people. Do you find that there is a pattern to certain methods working with those different sets?
I'd say that all are based on trauma, regardless of what the makeup is, and you're working a lot with defences. That I'd say that's the main thing that you've got to try and work through. And when you find the kind of way in which someone will work, it's adaptable. But then I have clients that I find really difficult. Like, I really struggle with working with people that have borderline personality disorders, because you're constantly at the edges all the time. You don't know what's real. You don't know what's where you are. And you're constantly being thrown about all the time, and I find those the most complex and more challenging. So I kind of stick to, because I'm dyslexic myself, I find, because my way my brain works, I find, I've got the same language as those people that are neurodivergent, so I will go down that route and help them because they work on a similar way.
Lee Brocklebank has liked the stream. Thank you, Lee.
Hi, Lee.
Thank you very much indeed.
Mike, can you just put that up a touch, please? I wanted to ask you. You're right.
Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe just talk louder.
Oh, right. Sorry.
No, so I'm joking.
Well, so a lot of statistics, say with addiction and stuff, show that there's a far lower percentage that are able to hold the change, and many just go back to addiction again. With things with like repeat offenders and stuff like that as well. Do you see that so far there's anything, I don't know, in science or well, it is the science of your work, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, that can ever change that?
I would say with addiction, people that either have overcome it will still have addiction in another way, but it will be deemed as more positive. So they might go to the gym more, or they might...
They'll just have an addiction in a different form.
It will... Because I think, as you said, you know, if you've got those pathways that are kind of already set, it's hard for you to break them. But
is it easier to redirect them than break them?
Well, yes, I'd say so. But it just depends on the willpower of people. And then if you spiral again, you're going to go back to the...
Because that is, to me, that's a really interesting quandary. We have these personalities and they get shaped at very young. You know, you're taking in all this information, how you see your parents. Your parents are gods when you're a toddler, or whoever your guardians are. And you just absorb all this information on how they behave, how they respond or respect or disrespect people, how they show love or how they show anger, and all those things. And then you assimilate that because that seems like the lessons that you're learning.
Yeah. And
then when you join school, your horizons expand by the people, your peer groups and stuff like that. And then your brain set also as well how your innate personality traits are. So, you know, how quick you are to anger, or how happy you are. People have a predisposition. So there was a study, I think, just the beginning of last year that seemed to say that there could be a genetic disposition in people's DNA that makes certain people more disposed to, say, depression or stuff like that. Yeah. And also, you know, the famous thing about the addiction gene and stuff like that, you know, and the murder gene and stuff. So if that's innate in people, and there's also, you know, I always say, like when you watch babies, that's how that personality or the human being is untouched. Like, you know, if they take a toy, how quickly they are to snatch, or they might, you know, toys go, they go, oh, I'll move on to something else. You're trying to change those things, our kind of social instincts, or our I can't think of the word, like
I know humanity.
What you mean. We change those things. So, I must share, and then that'll work out better for me. Or, you know, all those things. And then you're coming in to help them, give those tools to change and stuff. But then as soon as they're taken out of that, how do you, and as much as like you're saying, you then do it in a family therapy and stuff like that, but there's still so much going on in the world that will teach people, you know, if you break the rule you can get this quicker, or whatever the case is. How do you personally see that or respond to that?
A very quick hello to Bav.
Oh, hi, Barry.
Hello, Bav.
I think that's
And Carrie and Lee.
Yeah.
I think
Carrie's on the treadmill today. Yeah, sorry.
I think
I know that's a really complicated question.
It is,
but
it
just
is.
how you see it personally.
I think what my job isn't to necessarily fix, and I know that I've said, you know, I've gone in, done this thing, and people have learnt how to do things for themselves, but it's more kind of an understanding of the self, of understanding why they've got an addictive personality, or where those things come from, because defences stop people from accessing, you know, the reasons why, and stop people from being accountable. Lots of people will say, oh, it's because of my mum, or it's because of this, and therefore people don't take accountability for themselves. And I think that's something that I really strive for, is to say, yes, this has happened, but actually let's look at yourself in the here, and not to, as you were talking about on your last podcast, enabling people, not to enable them, but to be able for them to be able to go and be more independent. Because
that is a real problem, that everyone, like, there was a study done with...
I need an animation.
I'm so sorry. It's just because I spend all my time awake, so I read this stuff at night. And they went to... it was a very big study of criminals, but it was where they'd done kind of grand larceny, theft, and also misdemeanors and stuff like littering and stuff like that. And they were asking people, you know, do you feel guilty? And let's say for littering, the people were saying, well, I'm actually, you know, by me doing that, it's giving someone a job. And every you know, if I steal some people's stuff, I break into their house, well, the insurance company are going to get them better and newer stuff to replace it, so they're covered. So everyone's making an excuse for their shortcomings, and that's a human trait. It's very hard for people to go, you know what, I've been a dick. And so how do you... Because obviously... In your role, you can't just go, you've been a bit of a dick.
Oh,
like
I
that.
do.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I do often. Will call people out to say, you know, your behaviour there, I've noticed, but I do it in a way that's not oppositional. So
you do it smiling.
You've been such a dick.
I do it in a way that's observational. I've just noticed that the way in which you made that comment, there might have been a little bit of, you know, narcissism within there, or I might just say a bit of a thing.
So won't they instantly get defensive at that point?
Not always, no, because I think that I wouldn't probably use the word narcissism, but I might use the word. God, my brain is just like gone to sleep now. But egocentric, I might say. That was quite about you. I'm just wondering how you feel that they might feel about that, and just give an exploration around reflectiveness, because I think that is such a powerful tool if you can be reflective.
So it's saying a percentage wise, how do you find people respond to that? Because you're obviously trying to put it as positively as you can, so that you don't get their defences up. Yeah. As soon as the defence is up, the shutters are up. Yeah. So I'm presuming. Yeah. So how would you say most people would react to that? Because if they're in a therapy setting as well, they know that they're kind of a bit more open to say, if you would just say at the bus stop and you say, yeah, it's a bit...
Yeah, I mean, you have to build the rapport first. I couldn't just say on the first session, God, you're a narcissist and that you've been an absolute dick. I would say I would build up the rapport and start to understand a lot about them, but then it's about taking what they've said. So what I say is that there's a... Do you know Bion? The container?
No.
So it's about the therapist being the container and holding the stuff, but you only hold it for a certain amount of time, because then you enable...
So, sorry, could you explain that to me? You're holding the stuff.
A container, so you're holding, so you get... Lots of people give you the information, you know, they use the therapy space as somewhere where they feel safe, they can they can be relaxed, they can say things that they wouldn't say to anybody else, and that you're building up that therapeutic relationship and that level of trust. But it's not the therapist's job to hold all of that stuff forever.
Right.
It's basically, you then need to turn it and give it back to them and let them reflect on it to say, well, okay, well, you've given me the stuff, I've held it for this amount of time. You don't give it all back in one go, but you say, you know, when you were talking about your relationship with your mum and how challenging it was, I'm just thinking about, you know, is there anything in there that feels familiar to you about how you might act or behave? And then you suddenly see that they can make connections.
They can suddenly start being introspective.
Yes, yeah, and that's where the work happens when
Right.
you're able to then give it back to them.
Is it kind of like, say, you take all of this information, and a lot of the time for them it's just carnage going on. So you take that in, kind of, I suppose, like people who have when people have their blood spun, you take the bad blood, you spin it round, and then you give it back in a way that's more constructive. So you kind of almost drip feed it back to them in manageable bite-sized pieces, so that they can then respond to that rather than just the massive great picture of just saying, no, what about this little bit and this little bit and that bit?
Because lots of people will just they'll just externalise, they'll just get everything out on their head in kind of like big splurges, and then you just kind of absorb it, take it in as the therapist. And it's about then translating it in a way that they understand, because for some, if I was just to talk back at them, they wouldn't hear it. But if I was to put it into something, like created it into something, they can visually see it. And lots of people, from what I've observed being neurodiverse, is people have to externalise onto projective things, whether it's projective onto people, like lots of people will project their anger onto somebody, not meaning to, but it's a way of getting that feeling out rather than being able to name it.
The frustration and anger, I just need to
expel it, but they haven't got the filter or understanding to say, I'm doing this because I am angry.
Right.
They just
have the urge, the feeling and move.
The instinct to get it out. So that's what the projection stuff can do, is they can project it onto something, and it's about being a witness a lot of the time. So you're witnessing somebody observing something about themselves that they then have an understanding of. Oh, there's a reason why I do this. It's because when I and then it's understanding their own behaviours. So then for neurodiverse people, I do this when I get angry, and I didn't realise it was anger. Like some people can get really and like high anxiety about not having control, and then they'll just like go into a frenzy. But then if they can recognise that, it's because I'm feeling out of control and I don't feel confident about this, or I'm feeling really anxious, if they're able to name that quicker, then you're not going to get this big rise of cortisol.
Do you find is it very difficult to get people who are, when they because obviously in that emotional moment, self-awareness, self-control is very, very difficult. Do you find it difficult to try and get people to see and acknowledge what those feelings are? Is it a difficult thing to get people to open and accept?
No, I think children are much better at it than adults, because they're more pliable, if you like. Because they're like sponges. They take on concepts really well. And luckily with schools now, you've got the zones of regulation, which are based on the 5 basic primal feelings that we have, which is joy, sadness, anger, disgust, and what have I missed? Joy, anger...
Flies. Get out of it.
Someone will probably ping on there and say... But
Carrie, you're watching.
Carrie say... I was the same earlier, Laura. It's been sociable for me. My brain doesn't work.
When you were saying
my brain doesn't work. The brain fog. Where were we? Can't remember.
Right, so you'd listed 4 of the 5.
Yes.
We can't remember what the 5th one was.
Sadness, joy, anger, disgust,
hatred,
fear. Did I mention fear?
No, you didn't.
Fear. Yeah, they're the 5 primal feelings, and lots of people only ever really focus on joy, because everyone's like, we've got to be at a joyous state. We've got to be. I'm not saying that everyone should go around like being rageful and angry all the time, but lots of people suppress their other feelings for fear of how it's perceived by others, and lots of people haven't acknowledged those feelings because of how they were kind of put away when you were children. You were punished for being angry or being sad and being told to stop. But actually, if it's been scientifically proven that when people cry, you release cortisol, like within your tears, and there's a reason why babies get angry and cry, because that's how they get their basic needs met, is by basically
displaying,
shouting, and getting someone's attention. So it's harder in adults because they're more conditioned.
Don't kill it, dude.
It's a mosquito.
It's a muzzy.
Yeah, but still,
Yeah,
it's a living thing.
Yeah, it's going to bite and drink your blood and...
Well, not if you just shoo it away. Anyway, go on. Sorry, I'm not here to preach to you. If you want to kill it, you kill it. Sorry, go on.
That's okay. So yeah, I'd say it's easier with children, but with adults, you kind of have to go back through the years of, of all of the different ideologies that have been placed on people, and try and break them and try and find a new way for them to be able to feel safe in exploring feelings.
How much do you think, and this comes back to what you were saying about, what is our genetics? What are you hoping it goes? Yeah. Simon is offering you the door, Mr. Mosquito, rather than old Stalin over here of the insect world. But so regarding sort of what Simon said and about how much we can change within a person's mental makeup, what do you think is there anything that can be changed with enough work, or are there hard limits that are sort of acknowledged? Or is it literally different for every human being of how much of a person's neural pathways, how much of a person's behaviour can be...
Well, your brain is plastic.
Yeah.
Plastic.
Yeah.
They talk about it being, it can be manipulated.
It's malleable, yeah. Yeah, and you can do things. I would say that with my type of work, you can understand why something has happened to you, and you can resonate, reflect, and forgive, but it's not going to help you from being triggered still. And this is why I'm very grateful to Carrie for exploring her EMDR journey, because that has been something that's really supported me, because I have had EMDR because I'd had lots of psychotherapy in my life, which had really helped me reflect, understand. The whole reason I went into being a therapist was because I was a teacher before. I then got into a very difficult relationship where I was abused, and I was working as a teacher, and it was a teacher that I was working in the same school that did it, and within such a short amount of time I'd gone from somebody really, really confident to somebody that was like had no sense of belonging anywhere. And I hadn't told anyone that he'd broken my finger either, and that all came out after the relationship. But that kind of sense of like my world becoming so small made me want to go and help others. And I think this is what a lot of people do when they become therapists, is that because things have happened to them, that the helper role becomes such a instinct for them to want to go and help others. But you can only do that if you've actually helped yourself. And this is what I worry about with people that offer services that, where you can sit and be, but they haven't done the work themselves, and can sometimes do damage. So I find that quite challenging.
Most apparently, though, again, statistically, the majority of people that are drawn to therapy have had an experience of therapy at some point, and exactly like you're saying, they feel the repair and what it's done to rejuvenate them, and then they're drawn to explore it more, and then sort of produce it. But so going back to the MDR thing, I could understand it and reflect, but I was still being triggered by certain things. And what happened with the EMDR was that helped me actually process where the triggered responses were in my brain, so that I wasn't feeling all of those things again every time I got triggered by something. And that, I think, will be where I want to go next, because it works so well with drama therapy, because you're using a lot of metaphor
and you're able to kind of create stories within your imagination that link so closely with drama therapy.
Is there any other way to achieve that? So for instance, if you're able to explore something yourself, think about, right, well, this happened, my reaction was this, but looking at it, pulling myself back, A, B, C, D happened, and I responded, or I took on something, or I enabled, or I was enabled, or whatever the case is, and then try and make that change yourself. Do you see that there can be an equal success, or does that depend on, again, people's personalities?
I think it depends on the people and how reflective they are and how much they can take.
Because I think that's definitely one problem, is a lot of people aren't very reflective.
No.
They're in that moment,
Yeah.
and then life's so busy, everything's so chaotic, everyone's so tapped into things like social media, phones, and or just general life, that they don't necessarily look at things and analyse them and pick it apart.
Yeah, or repair.
Yeah.
Which I think is one of the most crucial things around trauma, is that most of the time when a trauma happens, there's been no repair. And if the repair can happen soon after that, where everyone can take, because it's not always just about the black and white, that you've got that villain and that the perpetrator and the victim. Everyone has a part to play in that.
Yeah.
And it's being able to teach people, I did this was what I'll own, what about for you? And to actually have that repair, which actually means that things move on quicker. I say that's part of that. But I would say for men are very good at, here's a problem, let's find a solution. I mean, I could be generalising here, but...
No, I think you're fairly on the ball. Most of the guys I know are very... And again, it's a generalisation. I know everybody's on a spectrum of gender, but the way our brains operate. But most of the men I know, if they encounter a situation, they will try to fix.
Yeah.
Whereas, and a person like I know a lot of women can talk about the same problems over and over again. The man's like, well, we could solve this problem, but I just want to talk about it. They're not necessarily looking for a solution. It's, these are my emotions, I need my emotions validated. And that's what I tend to find, just even in my sphere, my tiny sphere of existence.
But that's the thing, though. See, sometimes we can say our reality is such, and it may not correspond to there's over 7 billion people on the planet. At the most, 1,000 people. So that sphere may not be... That's why studies and surveys and things like that are really interesting, because they give us this broader kind of picture. I would kind of... My personal opinion... First of all, what's your opinion on it? Is just that men seem to...
From the people I have in my life and from the men I work
your
with...
Your experiences.
Yeah. Boys are very different to men in terms of... They are more kind of adaptable and will talk more about emotions, but I think that's because of the way in which that we're much more aware of kind of the mental health side of things. But from the men I have in my life, I would say that that they are more kind of problem-based solution, and the women in my life are more emotionally led.
So I would kind of disagree with some of that with both of you, and my reason for that being is I think that depends on different eco-social surroundings and also demographics as well. So in this country, for instance, it's very different to some of the say African nations and stuff like that, where men's roles are slightly different to women's roles than they are here, say, for instance, and also as well that I kind of see that there's so women historically are more connected to their feelings than men, and men historically are more the kind of hunter-gatherer.
Well, it's the men is from Mars, women are from Venus.
Yeah, exactly.
Analogy,
but then I suppose you could say, if you took, like, for the example, the Victorian era. And also there's been throughout history when they've said behind every great man is a great woman. A lot of the time the people with the real power who were doing the behind the scenes, the manipulations, the politics, oftentimes was the women, the brains of the outfit.
I mean, I think that's really a great example. They were the ones who were actually solving the problems.
Yeah.
And the men were so busy trying to pay lip service to stuff. And not necessarily actually tackling the problems. So that's kind of where I disagree with that a little bit. And so in a way, you could say, that's what I'm saying, historically, you're saying the gender roles are there. But I think things have changed quite a bit.
And I can only go from what's
your personal experience. Yeah,
and
100%.
you know, I'm living.
I keep saying 100%. And I hate saying
but
that.
You know, in terms of the demographic of where I live, and the people that are within that, they, you know, it's kind of quite middle class, white British, and that is kind of the norm of the people that I see.
Yeah. Just quickly need to say, sorry. Yeah, for some reason the YouTube chat is almost like 5 to 10 minutes behind.
Oh, dear.
I've got no idea why. But as Carrie's noticed, she's literally only just answered, they want to externalise in order to process. When you were talking about neurodivergence not being... So that was about 5-10 minutes ago.
Oh, yeah.
So...
There's a question I want to ask you, and this is going to be a bit of a big one.
Okay.
So,
strap in, everyone.
What's the meaning of life? No. So, what happens when someone comes to see a therapist, and they're telling their story, their experience, but you're not getting the full picture. You're getting it as they see it, with whatever biases they have, with whatever self-doubt they've got, all the self-excuses they've got. You know, so-and-so said this to me and I reacted like this, when in fact that may not have been the case at all.
Hello, Sophie. Sophie Watkins, is that a friend of yours?
Sure.
Well, you're welcome, and you're
a friend of all of ours now.
So you could have someone, say for instance, and I know of a few examples like this, where the gift that keeps on giving, where they would their reality was just so diverse from what was happening. They previously had a lot of drug abuse, drink abuse, say for instance, and so every time you drink and take drugs, it kills off brain cells, and as much as your brain can regenerate somewhat, it takes a lot longer for that to regenerate, again from the studies I've read and stuff, and so those pathways and stuff, the brain functionality is constantly corroding and corrupting, and they would go to therapy and say, oh, you know, I'm the victim because of this, that and the other and whatever, and the therapist of course is trying to give them tools so that they can make their life happier, and then they will use that as an excuse to say, oh, my therapist said this, so I was completely in the right and everyone else is wrong. How can that ever be resolved? Because that surely is, that gives someone, it kind of enables someone.
It does enable. It does enable. And when somebody comes to me, I do a really in-depth 2 hours with them, going through an assessment form, and I will ask about history, I mean, whether people tell me the truth or not. But one of the things I found most interesting that you can tell a lot from is a genealogram.
So explain. I don't know what that is.
So genealogram is basically, it's like a family tree that you do.
It's a lamp you rub.
Genealogram. Tell me how I'm going to fix this person. No, it's basically a family tree.
Right.
And within the family tree, I start to then look back at patterns. So generational trauma, cyclical patterns that have happened through the generation before. And that's usually quite a clear indicator, because psychotherapy looks back, so it looks back at what's kind of been before.
Is that where they they mark down kind of the relationship
Yes.
that they had with that individual, and
Yeah, and then you look at
context.
age.
Yeah.
So you look at, how old was your mum when she had you? Oh, 21. Yeah. How old was your grandma? Oh, she was 21. So you kind of see the patterns of like, young parents, or, are the parents together? No, they're not. And then you kind of see the attachment traumas playing out. So you kind of see where the relationships kind of go. And so when somebody's coming to me and, they've got an addiction problem or something, there's only so much I can do as a therapist.
Yeah,
And-
exactly.
And I would say to somebody, like, I'm always looking for the aims. Like, I have to evidence why somebody is in therapy with me. If they're with me for years and years, I have to have aims and goals and objectives to say, you're in therapy for these aims. If they've like decided that they just want to come because it's become part of their routine to come to me as a therapist, I'm not then able to help them. I have a supervisor who asks me about, a clinical supervisor who asks me, about
It's kind of the
people I'm
watchdog.
working-
over-
the watchdog, to make sure that I'm
Yeah.
adhering to the HCPC standards of my job. And if somebody isn't making the progress, that's where I have to say, look, we've got to a stage now where we've looked at this, but I don't feel like I can support you anymore, because that is the container giving back to say,
Right.
I can't
So-
help you anymore.
Slightly didn't really answer my
Okay,
question.
sorry.
So sorry. No. I don't think I made my question clear. That's why. So if you've got someone who's just not being truthful,
Yeah.
but to them they're giving again. So human beings, we make excuses for all our foibles.
Yeah.
Oh, I did this because of this, or well, I snapped at you because you said something,
Yeah.
even if it wasn't the case.
So no accountability. For
Yeah, exactly.
themselves.
It wasn't me. It was
Okay.
somebody else. I didn't do it. And that's a big trait with all human beings.
Yeah.
It's very hard for people to be
Authentic,
brutally
yeah.
honest with themselves.
Yeah.
And that's just because we're made imperfect. So if you're only getting someone's account,
Yes.
and you can only trust them as far as you can throw them,
Yeah.
because that you weren't there, you can't know. It's not impossible. It's impossible to know. And also as well, I think when people go to therapy, it does stroke their ego, because they're talking about themselves. It can be, they're getting
A sense
dopamine
of
from
self.
that.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
a sense of self, isn't it?
Yeah, they're talking about themselves. So that can be kind of addictive, and it can also be a way that they feel that they get okayed for things they do, even though you give them work to do. Well, you can deal with this better, but ultimately you're not.
Oh, again.
Carry on.
Yeah, I think he must drink like a vat of something before we come in.
Teeny bladder.
The pea-sized bladder. So shall we talk about him? Right, I really don't like him much. Though.
Oh, it's a bit of splitting going on. The dynamic of the split.
So they're going to paint a picture where they're always the victim.
Yeah.
You're giving them tools to try and make them deal with life better for whatever they're finding difficulties with, whatever they're finding trauma with. You're trying to help that, but very often they will see that as my therapist said, or my therapist said, and they can use that as an excuse for their behaviours, for carrying on with traits. Again, those neural pathways are kind of, some of those are really set in stone.
Yeah.
It's very hard for that to change. Is there any way around that? I mean, I can't honestly see that there is any way around it.
So,
Because there's nothing that you can really do.
No.
You're getting a story.
Yeah.
It's like reading a book. You're getting a version of something.
yeah, but this is why I like doing systemic work.
Right.
Because,
So if I can give you an analogy,
Yeah.
right? You're looking at JFK's assassination.
Yeah.
One book says, well, it was definitely a conspiracy, blah, 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 blah. This is all the things that happened. Then you get another book
Yeah.
and it says, no, it was Lee Harvey Oswald. He was the lone shooter, blah, 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 for all these reasons. How do you know? How can you tell?
well, you don't. And I don't know what people are saying when they go out to the world, I wouldn't know that they've said, oh, my therapist said this, or my therapist.
Yeah.
I mean, some clients do use them as a bit of a badge of honour. Oh, I'm having therapy at the moment, and they kind of do it in that way that gives them a sense of feeling like there's an importance in the fact that they're having the therapy,
Yeah.
and for them that gives them a sense of worth.
But also as well, I think there's a thing of like, well, I'm getting cured. I'm doing the work and I'm getting cured, so I can't again, I can't really be blamed.
Yeah, and again, it's about the accountability, and I would say, like, to answer your question, I'm not going to know what people are going to say outside of the therapy if they've used me as a bit of a weapon.
So I'm not asking you from the point of you as a therapist, you as a person looking at the bigger picture of how therapy and people work, kind of.
Yeah, and I think it becomes a defence, as you said. Like, my therapist has said this, and therefore it becomes a defence for people.
So if I behave like this, I should do, because if people are verbose to me, then I need to battle it like that.
But then I also feel that in them saying that, they haven't necessarily done the work and what the therapy was there for in the first place, in terms of them being able to look at their own stuff.
Is there anything that you could see that would ever resolve that issue? Because it's...
I think when you see people stand alone, they become very much around their own world, and therefore they can paint these pictures of what the fantasy looks like for everyone else.
Yeah.
This is why I bring everybody in.
Yeah.
And
so you can get that third perspective.
Because drama therapy is also all about roles. So what role do you take on? How many roles do you have within your system? And what are the other roles? And then you bring in those other roles, and then you see that actually that role that they're saying that they take on, they don't take on.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like a puzzle piece where you then take these other pieces and then go, well, actually, here's the missing cog. Here's actually what the fundamental issue is that's still not working because you've put it under the carpet somewhere.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you bring everybody in, you then start to connect the dots.
That's really interesting.
I suppose
that's why I like doing the systemic work rather than the one-to-one.
I suppose that's the difference between also if you have
Thank you.
if you have therapy on your own, or then you have like or relationship counselling.
Yes.
So you can go into the therapy session and the partner has spilled a wonderful story of how badly they're treated by you, that they're the absolute angel, they never do anything wrong, and then you see the interaction between the two and you're like, none of this matches up.
Yeah.
But then you get that often with, so say famously blokes will get together with their friends and go, my girlfriend, blah, 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 blah. And girls will go, he did this to me, to their girlfriends and stuff. And that's kind of acting as that therapy role. You're offloading to their friends.
Well, it's validation. That's what you're getting in that, is that you're validating my side of the story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but what I love about you, Simon, is that you...
Is it my massive nose?
How
it just overweights my head.
But you sit in the grey so much, and not a lot of people.
I'm very grey.
Not a lot of people.
I'm quite
want
dull
to
and
do
grey.
that. No, but lots of people don't want to sit in that. They want to have a definite answer. And sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need to know whether it's this or this. But actually, what you do is you go, but what about this? But what about that? And you allow more scope and question, which is what's needed, because you need to allow people to have different ways of thinking.
Yeah, I think with you understand the fallibility of human beings, so therefore you understand that how much...
It's just me, I know, I'm so rubbish. I learned this because I'm rubbish.
But what you were saying about... literally there was a point I just wanted to come back to.
I'm sorry, man.
No, it's all right. We were talking about accountability and also victimhood and all that kind of thing. And this is something that I wanted to touch on before we got to the end.
Sorry, just remember that Carrie said generational traumas. Again, I think that's going back to what you was talking about. Yeah. When you go through the family tree.
When they talk about a mental health crisis now, there's more people, especially young people, struggling. People just don't seem to know their place in the world. A lot of things are changing. A lot of roles,
Could I just ask you a question? Is it though that more people are suffering, or is it just that people are more aware of mental health trauma? I mean, I think historically people have always been sad about things. People have always struggled about things. If anything, we have a far better life than, say, the Victorian era, or say go back to the 1800s or 1600s, where 1 minute you had a healthy child, the next minute they just dead.
My personal opinion is because life is better, people have more time to be introspective and more time to worry about things that probably aren't that important and get caught up in the rat race.
So there's good research to say, like for instance, the most depressed sector are kind of mid-aged
White
males,
yes.
Yeah.
because they've got a good life, but the minute something bad happens, the traumas, it feels like they've had everything taken from them.
But is there something now that something you were talking about regarding, and I've spoken to several people recently about the whole as we progress down the mental health route and we start acknowledging people have different, there's this label, that label, and the danger of once you're diagnosed, and I've seen this with several people, and a friend of mine recently, how once she was given the diagnosis, she found that she almost settled into that diagnosis, and it created basically rules and boundaries for her that she didn't have before. Where she was like, well, before I used to just get on with it and I functioned better, but when I was given this diagnosis, like, oh, I don't have to do this now because it's because of this.
So she became enabled by her diagnosis.
Exactly. And then she spoke to me and said, I think I'm going to go back to how I was before. She said, even though it was more of a struggle and I had to, she said, I had to really compartmentalise my life, I functioned better in society. I suppose my question is that from a point of view that in life, we all know that life is difficult and you will come up against challenge after challenge after challenge. If people are, I suppose, told that, because of your diagnosis or this, that it's okay, you don't have to do this, it starts focusing more on the individual and sort of seeing them as a victim rather than empowering to say, okay, this is the rule book we can work with, but it just means you will have to work a bit harder and you may struggle with things, but it doesn't mean that you still
can't do things.
You can't do things.
Yeah, and I mean
that was a really long-winded.
Yeah,
one.
wow, really.
Yeah. But
I'm still awake.
I think since COVID, there has been a lot more unmasking of people that when they've been at home, because you've got the Bumfoolery ecological system, which is basically like you've got the microsystem, which is home, and then you're meant to have like school and work, and then like family, like external, like grandparents, and then kind of going on holidays. Those things, it's meant to be the thing that we're supposed to transition quite easily in and out of. But then when COVID hit, everyone's world got smaller and the microsystem became just home, and actually getting over to the next level, going to schools and things like that, just became nearly impossible for people that were quite traumatised by the conformity of what COVID meant for them. And so lots of people that I know now have kind of unmasked since COVID, and they don't want to go back to, or they're still living in a bit of a fear state around, what does society mean to them. But with the diagnosis, I'd say it's a really difficult one, because I was diagnosed at 27 with dyslexia and I went through school struggling. But I put in coping strategies, which is what I think your friend had done. She'd put in those coping strategies for herself. And being dyslexic has kind of helped me, because it's meant that I've had to find other ways of doing things and understanding myself. But it doesn't mean that I should use it as a defence for not being able to do things.
That's one of my worries, especially for the upcoming generation, is the fact that, as you say, coping strategies are something that everybody, whether you're on the spectrum or not, you have to develop to work
I've got a big question coming up with
I
this.
can feel it. I can see it brewing. I can feel the tension. But my worry is that because with life you have to learn coping strategies. You will get hit with traumatizing events. It's inevitable, and you are going to have a toolkit that helps you deal with it. And my worry is that as time goes on, if people are told that you don't have that because of your issues, shouldn't have to worry. People should just accept you as you are. You don't need to have a coping strategy. It's the world should sort of appreciate,
pander to your need.
Yeah, but also the fact that you are an individual and your individualism is valid, rather than saying, no, we're all part of this together and we all are going to have to put some work in.
But that's kind of a double-edged sword,
yes,
though,
it
isn't
is,
it?
yeah. Because I'd say, like, it's important to understand, because I think part of what my work is being the translator for those people that struggle with certain things, like especially with school refusers, and that's like quadrupled in the last 2 years because of COVID. And it's about understanding that relationship, or understanding the triggering for them, so that they're then able to understand what that need is for themselves, to then learn the strategies to get in place. But as you've said,
I'm worried.
You don't want that to become like their kryptonite of not being able to do.
I'm
things.
worried that people, if they are told that basically that they are the victim, that they won't pursue those strategies that you talked about, because it is important to.
But that's why I'm saying it's a double-edged sword, though, because so from one point of view, you think, right, we were going to work in a society, so we all have to make compromises to fit in
the equality and diversity of life.
Yeah, and also the prescribed kind of rules, of the unwritten rules of the society, but then at the same time, if people have weaknesses, you want that social order to be able to help and adjust to them. And that's why I kind of think it's a double-edged sword, and I think that's this ongoing conversation that society is having is, well, where do you stand?
It's finding that happy medium, isn't
but
it?
That's a really hard thing.
Yeah, but I just think about like the metaphor of making a cake, for example. So you've got the equality going in there, then you've got the diversity in there, then you've got the inclusion, and then you've got the kind of social norms all within there. Some of those ingredients aren't always going to mix, and therefore you kind of, it's really hard to get the balance right with all those things, because one is going to inherently be stronger than another in whatever environmental factor is happening as well, because you've got all those other dynamics at play. And
also, as well, as human beings, we all have different tolerances for certain things. Yeah. So some people will say, well, I'm fine with disabled people, but I don't like people of colour. Or might say, I'm fine with neurodiverse, but I can't stand some other trans or something like that. There's all these different things, and then when you start adding in the neurodiversity, different elements of neurodiversity, ADHD, people being on different levels of the spectrum and stuff like that, and that's a really difficult balancing act, and I don't think there's a perfect answer.
No,
there really
I
isn't.
agree. I mean, something interesting about masking as well. And I mean, and Carrie have talked about this, and Carrie talks about masking as an autistic person, and I come from the point of view that all human beings will mask.
I would agree with you,
because none of us can go out into the world and be our true selves, because then everything in the world becomes about us.
Yeah, but then I think you get different degrees of masking.
Absolutely,
yeah. And with ASD and girls who mask, from what the studies that all of the studies and all of the quantitative testing that's done is based on white British males, and it doesn't lend itself to understand. They're looking at it more now in terms of autistic girls, but then there's a whole argument about what is neurotypical, because we don't.
That's really the next question I want to ask. I want to ask you about.
Where does neurotypical lie now, and are they the minority?
So just
so this is actually related to what probably someone was going to say. I heard we were talking about this before. It's how can you tell a neurotypical trait from a trait of someone, for example, who's experienced maybe trauma or a certain upbringing? It's very difficult. The lines can be so blurred between, and that's why they say with like these diagnoses, they take such a long time, because you can manifest these just from your life experience and just your uniqueness as an individual. So, sorry, go on, Simon.
So I just want to say, Rob says, "Hey all, great to hear an honest chat about real mental health. Also good to see." I saw Rob at the weekend. He was playing in a band just before so he was doing the midday show and we were doing the later show. He's such a lovely fella.
He is a lovely.
Yeah, he's a lovely fella. He had a couple of A-string breaks, and sadly to say, Rob, I had a couple of string breaks when I was playing as well.
You're all playing too hard. Play like a pansy, like me. You never break strings.
Tickle the strings. Right, so my question is, again, and not necessarily you as a therapist, but you as a person.
Yes.
So, because obviously you've got your business head, but then you've got your own kind of thoughts and feelings as well. So, things like ADHD, for instance, there seems to be a lot of different psychologists and scientists coming forward saying there's no real formalised test. There's tests for it, but it depends how the person testing interprets the test, whether they see that as ADHD or not.
Yes.
And same for certain severe autism, it seems a lot more clearer.
Yeah.
But for more milder forms of autism, it's a judgment call on whether that is or not. But then, so we had like an hour and a half. We were on the phone to each other.
Oh God, yeah.
A while back, just having a chat about this. There's all of us have our quirks, and you with your crazy boots like that. You know, that there's things that say I'd have. Some people would say, oh, that might be on the spectrum, or you might be ADHD for that, or whatever it may be. But it's not that. I might be just have nervous tension in my body, or I might be just an excitable person, or so. How can that thing of what is neuronormative, divergent? Isn't it just that we all have different traits?
I think in its extreme form, then that's where you can tell.
Yeah,
I think.
But there has to be a cut-off point, wherever that may be. There has to be a cut-off point.
But there's what they call they're the Venn diagrams where they merge. So there isn't a sliding scale in autism anymore. It's not like mild to like severe. It's more a wheel of, you know, where are your social anxiety, where are your social skills, where's your eye contact, where is your like your emotional like responses, and therefore it's more kind of generalized, or not generalized, bespoke, I'd say, opposite to that, around like where the person kind of fits in, because they're seeing more tendencies, which I think makes it harder to kind of put in the quantitative measure of it's either, you know, it is or it isn't, because now it's become more diversitized. Is that even a word? Yeah.
It is now.
In terms of how we see it. And interesting you say about the ADHD, because my daughter just had a test for it, and all of her results from school came back, and actually at home, on a very low scoring, because they are, when she does have extreme behaviours, they are really extreme, but they are not every single day.
Yeah.
And so therefore I went on, moderately, but not like extreme all the time.
Yeah.
And therefore they were just kind of quite dismissive. And she did a QB test, which is where you sit in front of a screen, and then they make you look at a ball going back and forth, and you have to click it. And if you're really inattentive, you're going to move your head around a lot more. But then you've got something called hyperfixation, which when people can hyperfix on something, if they can get into a rabbit hole with something, all the concept of time goes out the window. Then you're able to do those things. But she was negative on that too. So and it's difficult, because as a parent to her,
you see the traits and you recognise them within that arena.
I see the traits. I see all the neurodiverse kids I work with that have got diagnosis, and look at her and go, she's got those traits, but I don't get recognised as a therapist in that realm, or I feel like I can't justify them. I can't say, oh, it's it's not this extreme thing that you're expecting that you're expecting to have. It's when they are extreme, they're very extreme, and when they're not, we kind of function. But is that because I've got the know-how and the experience of 10 years? That's fine. Of 10 years of working within neurodivergence. So is there literally any way to get around that? I mean, I to me, the way I look at it is that the science is still quite young in the way it is. So these things are still being formulated. They're still being methodologies are still being designed around it. But because it's that kind of, so for instance, someone might be, get down a rabbit hole in a certain way because they're very analytical maybe, or they have the way that the left and right side of the brain are talking maybe slightly different to somebody else, but it doesn't mean that they're necessarily under a certain banner for something like that. How will that ever be? Apologies. I mean, that is really the thing of everything when it comes to how the brain works and mental conditioning is. I think he's going.
See, unfortunately, we have a dog with a very, very dodgy back leg, and when Mum is going to bed, Mum can't carry her up the stairs.
Oh, bless.
So
Poppy.
I'm just going to have to quickly go in, carry the dog up the stairs for Mumsy.
No problem, dude. No problem. We'll wait until you come back. We won't say a word. When it comes to functionality of the brain, like if you've got a broken arm, it's very clear to see. If you've got a fracture, it's very clear to see. When it comes to how the brain functions, it's so variable from person to person, and there's so many aspects. I don't really know how that will ever be quantified, or how it can be quantified.
But you do have genetic links. So
could you explain?
So neurodiversity has been scientifically proven to be genetic. They always look for that in terms of...
So in what ways?
In terms of...
Could you give a for instance?
So when you go for the testing, they will ask, is there anybody within the family that's had it or had traits of it? And therefore they would then... So
like traits of what?
Of autism or ADHD.
Can you give an example of what form of autism, say, for instance?
So, there's such a broad scale of it.
Yeah, that's exactly the point.
Yeah,
so say lack of eye contact.
Yeah, lack of eye contact, or rigid viewpoints, or oh gosh, my brain just goes into.
So let's use lack of eye contact for example. So you say, my uncle had a lot of lack of eye contact, but what if he had a wandering eye and this child never just knew about it, or he was just a naturally nervous man, but it didn't necessarily mean that. And I know a lot of people like that, where I wouldn't really say that they're autistic. No. They're just nervous and they don't like to make eye contact. Or they're
So eye contact is, I guess, a challenging one, but.
So is there one that would be more definite to that then? That's not as challenging? Because I think, again, from my tiny bit of experience, there doesn't seem to be anything where you can say, it's kind of fairly clear cut or anything. Yeah,
and then it's different. I mean, Asperger's is not classed as a standalone anymore. It's part of the autistic spectrum. Yeah. Whereas people with Asperger's, you can tell that they have a very formal dress code that they will wear, and they'll be into quite specific things. But then you could say someone who's fastidious would be kind of the same thing, or eccentric. And so I don't really know how to answer that if I'm honest in terms of So that to me is thank you. That's a really good answer. I love that answer, in fact, because I don't know how that can ever be quantitative. No, and I think that there is. I think you can find things in everybody that with their idiosyncrasies. But you could say, well, I'll draw a line to that. Yeah, and it is difficult. But I would say that there are some traits which feel. I mean, you've got people that are like have really high sensory needs, and that's another thing to think about, which is people that don't realise whether they're hot or cold or not.
Yeah.
People that become dysregulated without even realising it. People that don't have pain thresholds. People that are sensitive to certain clothing.
So people without pain thresholds, for instance, that wouldn't be classed as under autism.
Well, there's links to it, but again, it's the Venn diagram of all these different things that merge in, because then you've got bipolar disorder within that, and then you've got depression all within that neurodiverse thing. So you think, where does it end? And then you've got dyscalculia, dyspraxia. They're all kind of in this whole plethora of what neurodiversity is.
So dyspraxia's in there as well.
Dyspraxia, dyslexia, and that's all.
So you've got dyspraxia, that would be considered
a neurodiversity. Yeah.
Right. So would that be considered as autistic as well?
There's links, but it wouldn't be if you were diagnosed, because I've got a standalone diagnosis of dyslexia with some dyspraxic tendencies.
Right.
But I haven't got any other diagnosis, just that. So that's the kind of standalone.
So again, where you were saying that you were diagnosed with dyslexia, but before that, you just knew you had trouble with numbers or letters, or and you had coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
Now, I think that to me sounds like nearly every human being I've ever met. They have certain things that they
can
find
do
easy.
or can't do. Yeah.
They have certain learning tendencies that mean certain things come easier to them than other things. Some things they'll find hard, or they'll keep making the same mistakes on the same things. Like, for instance, a lot of people, when they're spelling words with an S and a C, they'll mix them up. And they could say, oh, well, I'm slightly dyslexic with that, even though they've not been diagnosed with that, but they would term it as that. But that can be just because they don't dedicate enough concentration to it, or they, it's never seemed that important, so they dispense with the memory for certain words where they make that difference. But that could still be, somebody else would go, oh, well, if you're having trouble with that, you could be slightly along the dyslexic spectrum. So, and that's a terrible example.
But dyslexia is an interesting one, because me and my husband are both dyslexic, but in different ways.
Right. So can you describe that?
So he is really good at taking in auditory information, and when he went for his test, they said, he said, you're really good at picking up auditory cues and learning them. And he said, well, I'm a musician. He said, you're a musician because you're able to take up that auditory information.
What does he play?
Oh, he's the piano. And
he's the piano.
He is the piano.
He plays himself.
He plays himself. I'm sure he does. But he's not visual, so he can't remember where things are, and can't remember how to spell specific words. They literally go blind from his mind in terms of he can't remember how to even form a letter, like letters of certain words. Whereas my auditory information, if someone was to tell me like 3 things, or would describe something, like give a really long sentence and then ask me to answer it, my brain would have gone on holiday for half of that time.
Right.
And trying to retain that, like I said earlier when we were off air, I don't know my left or right. Like, I know if I really concentrate that I know what left and right is, but in an extreme situation
where someone goes, what, quickly,
and I'm like, left, and I'm like, oh, and then I go, no, that's not that, that's right. So I have to, it's like a conscious thing I have to think of like, what's my left and right. So very random. But is that dyslexia, or is it just the brain?
So exactly what I was about to ask. Is that really dyslexia, or could you just say that you need to spend a bit more time concentrating on things?
Well, yes, well, it's both. I mean, but the thing is, I have tried so many strategies in my life,
right?
But that goes back to, like, dyslexia forms in when you're like crawling. The left and the right side of the brain don't talk to one another. You get the bum shufflers and things like that. Is that when the two?
So is that like, could that be clinically proven that, say, your bridge is not passing information, or is it just that the brain's developed at its most malleable stage and didn't develop the connections?
I think I would have to do further research to be able to answer that,
No,
that
just
question. But yeah, I
but
mean,
as an idea,
yeah, I would say so.
What would you say is more like? What do you feel sounds more likely?
Well,
Just a gut instinct. It doesn't have to be correct or not. It's just
We're
a
never.
gut instinct.
We're very rarely correct on here.
well,
Like, no one's holding you to task.
but I
so.
would say that may be an inherent thing,
Right.
because my mum is dyslexic, and I think, you know, in terms of what you inherit
Yeah.
from your parents, may be part of
So
your pathway.
I'm gonna throw an idea to you, right?
Okay. God,
Sorry, I hope I'm not annoying you with
No,
this.
it's fine.
I'm just interested, that's all. So, could it be that your mum was also kind of like, oh, it's one or the other, you know, and never really kind of thought, right, I need to buckle down and do this. And so she developed her neural pathways, and that always became, so when she first went to think about things, her brain connected, is it left or right? Well, and so it never really made a neural pathway.
Okay.
And then genetically, that same kind of so proof of like kind of genetic memory and stuff like that, those instinctual things were passed down in your genetic makeup.
It's the chicken and the egg situation, isn't it, really?
So how?
Well, I would say what comes first? Is it that it's kind of, you know, something that's not passed on in terms of the learning, in terms of the learning development within somebody?
That's what I was just going to ask. Could it possibly be the fact of if somebody, because of an issue they have, they don't prioritise a certain thing, if that then, as you pass down information to your child, if that is no longer a priority for you or something that you have a bit of a blind spot with, then that, where you're nurtured in all the other areas, but that area is vacant.
So that area just doesn't develop as well as, say, something else. And then that becomes kind of the standard or set in stone.
Yeah.
So that always becomes the go-to.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Well, I'm not
Can't
ruling
say,
it out.
yeah.
Can't say either way. But I don't think you could rule it out. I think it's a mix of both, I would say.
Can I ask a question? Because time is cracking on, and we will have to wrap this up shortly, even though I get the feeling we could talk for a lot longer.
Oh, I could ask you so many questions.
So from a point of view of, because I'm always very interested in the fact of people being able to get on in the world and live a life that has that happy medium of being able to be themselves, but also being able to operate and function well in a society, you know, so that people aren't super struggling and can just be themselves. But as I said, where do you think is that happy medium of being able to support people enough to be able to help work on their problems, give them the tools, allow them their individuality to develop and be who they are, but also prepare them in a way for the reality of the world they live in? So giving them...
Because really, you also need to be quite hard to live a life, don't you?
You have
resilient.
to have
I shouldn't say hard.
Yeah.
Very resilient.
You have to have a certain level of armour to be able to cope with the realities of the world.
Yeah.
But if people feel like too much a victim, would that enable them not to be?
That's what I mean. So again, it's where we talked about support, enabling, equipping people, say, and sort of armouring them up to be able to deal with, you know, the horrors of what other people are willing to inflict. Because no matter how much your what you go through every day impacts you, or that you feel that other people should, you know, give you the benefit of the doubt and this, that and the other, most of the people in the world aren't going to give a rat's ass. They're just going to do their thing, and it's going to, you have to say, have that resilience and strength to be like, I can deal with this. And if you have got that victim status mentality, or you are very what's the word, insular? No, not the word insular.
Insecure?
Where you're very focused on your needs.
Egocentric.
Yeah. That's going to be a lot more difficult for you to be able to accept what is going on in the world and be strong enough to deal with it. So where do you think that happy medium and line is of support, but also of the individual and the collective? Where's that line?
I think
That's a really hard question.
in my work has changed a lot in the last 10 years of doing the therapy. And I've worked with some really, really hardcore trauma cases in like adoption and stuff like that. And I'd say the most important thing is about being able to repair as much as you can and forgive the past, because you can't change the past. Sounds like a cliche, but you can't. And to be able to take value in the present and be able to appreciate what you have now to what you didn't, recognize the patterns, the cyclical patterns that have happened. But actually, if you're able to be more of an observer of them rather than still repeat the patterns, that's where you're going to set yourself free from them and be able to bring in better habits for yourself. Now, therapy is hard, and I say this to all of my clients, that it's not a walk in the park, because you're having to do work on yourself. And for those clients that use therapy as my therapist said this and that, I would want to do that level of work through that level of defense with them, to say you've got to get to a place of wanting to feel authentic. And I feel that in my own personal journey, the more authentic I have been with myself, in owning my own flaws, in accepting who I am as a person, has really set me free to be able to help others in acknowledging their stuff.
I think that's a very big difference between what I would say you and a lot of people is you associate being authentic with accepting your flaws, while a lot of people see authentic as
being me.
Me being me in whatever capacity that may be, me being able to fully unload myself on the world. And I that's where
I have this problem, and that's why I behave like this. That's me being authentic.
Yeah, and I would want to spin that on its head to say true authenticity comes from accepting your part in the play.
Yeah.
Your part in that role. And people will place you, and it's a lovely metaphor for drama therapy, is that you'll be on several stages, not necessarily because you want to be, but people will place you in roles, and sometimes you'll be the lead, and sometimes you'll be the understudy, and sometimes you'll just be in the back doing the spotlight on somebody else. But if you can take ownership to say, I'm only in this role for a certain amount of time, I get to go back to my own stage, and I can be the centre of my own bit outside of this. And it's acknowledging that other people will have opinions, other people will have different viewpoints to you, and that doesn't mean that they're trying to cause harm to you, affect you. Sometimes they do, sometimes they're projecting in you, but it's being more of an observer of their need or their role being projected onto you. And that's what I hope drama therapy, or my role as a therapist, can do for people.
What do you enjoy most about your job?
I think...
What are the high points?
The high points are when you see people really, like, the penny will drop for them, and then they'll start to go, oh my gosh, there's a reason why I've done this, or they've come back to me years later and they've found a new way of breaking a cycle, and they're in really positive relationships, and they've acknowledged what they need to sever in their lives to be able to grow.
Yeah.
And yeah, I find it rewarding, but I am coming away from the trauma more now, because I've done so much personal growth in the last few years for myself that I want to do more kind of freeing stuff that doesn't...
What enabled the personal growth?
Doing the EMDR, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Doing the EMDR allowed all that trauma that I went through, that I was empathising with my clients with. I didn't have that anymore, even though I could still support them. I wasn't drowning in there with them. I'm not saying that I was necessarily, but with some, you kind of... That level of transference is so strong, where you're feeling what they feel. But now I've grown, I feel that I want to do some more. And I love the creativity that drama therapy can bring, because you can do lots of art, lots of creativity, but I feel I need to do something that's more, less trauma based and more kind of fun. So
more hopeful.
Because I know you've told me, haven't you, that where you are now is kind of the most self-aware and sort of progressed state that you've been in your life. So because you've acknowledged so many things, you've been able to take that step back and view yourself
But would you say that you would have said that about yourself at any stage? So say when you
No.
very first did... Really?
No.
So you would have said before, oh no, I still feel there's blind spots.
Yeah.
Really? So
Yeah.
how were you aware of the blind spots?
I think from just acknowledging, like working through the traumas of what they held, like that they held so much victim, like in me, like, oh, it's because of this, you know, and me not taking accountability for my own self within that, or forgiving others around me. That I feel that now I can kind of sit and observe even myself, like when something has happened, and take, you know, feel a bit more humble in that.
So I completely get that. What I don't quite understand is, so say when you first did some therapy, and so at that point you would have still said, no, I'm not the best that I've ever been.
What, when I first started therapy?
No. So you're saying you feel that you're at the height of, you're feeling the best about yourself that you've ever felt. But when you first had your, I don't know, the first therapy that you felt you made a breakthrough, and then the second part of the therapy you made another breakthrough. At those points, would you have not said, "Oh, I feel the best about myself"?
No.
No,
So-
I agree from knowing you.
Because
So in what way would you have
because
been?
I hadn't got to the root. I hadn't got to the.
You knew that you hadn't got to the root at those points.
Yeah, I knew that because I was still being triggered in lots of other ways. There were still other things. I mean, it's an ongoing process.
So are you not triggered by anything at the moment then?
No, not really. But not saying that I never will be. But there's an amazing analogy called the spiral staircase, where you'll go up the staircase and you'll come across the same things over and over again in your life, but you'll see them from different perspectives.
Yeah.
So the same things might happen to you, but you might have knowledge. And I'm not saying that I'm at the end of my journey, because I'm really not. I mean, I'll go and learn something else and look at something else along the way. But right now I feel content for the first time in a long time, and that could be because I'm about to hit 40 and a new chapter in my life.
Young scallywag.
I remember 40. It was
But no,
about
definitely
70 years ago.
From knowing you as long as I have and seeing the progression, you are definitely these days. Say you're a lot more settled in yourself. You
No drama.
You've made really important decisions in your life about, you know, cutting away the things that were toxic for you. So you've taken control more and realised that you do have the power. This is one of the things that I worry about a lot of people, is that what they forget is
that's what I find interesting, though, because so I understand you feel that you're at a pinnacle at the moment, and you're not saying that you won't hit another pinnacle.
No.
But because I kind of feel at most people's stages in their life, they kind of feel like once they get something out the door, they kind of feel, oh, I feel so much better about that. I got that out the door. That's the best I felt. And then something else improves, and you go, I got that out the door, and that's the best I felt. So you're always kind of going up that ladder, going, oh, this is the greatest rung I've ever been on. And then you get to the next rung, you go, oh, this is the greatest. I don't think... Or I find it hard to understand. That's why I was asking the question.
I haven't plateaued.
You wouldn't be at the 49th rung and say, yeah, I'm on the 49th rung, but I've got another 25 rungs to go, and I won't be happy till I hit that.
I think because with a lot of these things, it's not until there's, like I say, a really... Because you can tackle... Because obviously all of these things intertwine, don't they? A lot of your traumas and a lot of the way your mind works. And as things are slowly uncovered and as things are dealt with, you'll always feel that there is this big something that hasn't quite been got at. And when that happens, or all of these things interlink, and I suppose it's kind of like if you imagine, you know, where you sort of you pour... You see the people have all the glasses, and you pour the one, and the one goes into the other, and everything, and it spreads through.
That's only when you see it at a high level.
I think you can have that awareness.
If you're looking at one glass and it gets filled, and you go, "Oh, great!" and then as it pulled back, you go, "Oh, there's another two glasses."
No, but I think you can feel that there are more glasses to fill.
But at every stage that you go, "Oh, I feel I made a breakthrough," I think you go, "Oh, that was a massive point, and I feel really good about that." I don't think I find it hard to understand, and it's probably because I'm just really stupid. But like if you're making a breakthrough, you go, oh, I made a breakthrough, but I've still got 95 to go, or I've still got 26 to go. You never know what that quantity is because you don't see it from the high level. And then it might be that you go, oh, I feel really good about it, I made that breakthrough, and then something happens and you go, oh no, there's still something to deal with. Then you make that downturn, and then you make the next breakthrough and you go, oh, I'm 100% again.
But I think
and then something happens.
But that is life, isn't it? Like you're never gonna.
But that's what I was saying.
But
don't you have that at every stage though?
To a degree, yes, but not to the level of where I feel now, in terms of I feel so much calmer in myself, and I didn't get that sense of calm for a long period. Like
no,
yeah,
I completely understand that. So you've hit a good plateau, but like you can never miss something you never had.
Yeah.
So at the point that you weren't that calm, that was the norm. Yeah,
but I think before I was always looking
to be calm
for the next thing. What's next? Whereas now I'm able to sit more with the present. Like I was never. I was either looking back with the depression or looking forward with the anxiety. Whereas now I can kind of sit more in the present.
But couldn't that also be just because of the stage you are in life?
Well, yeah, I think that there's lots of factors in there, but I think in the journey that I've been on and connecting to that genuine part of myself and relaying that genuine part to others has helped other people to be genuine, which I think has helped in lots of ways.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think the more genuine I've been, the more authentic I've been in naming things, has allowed others to name their part. And I think that's the next chapter of where I'm going to next.
Right. So you do feel that there's still
of course there is, and there always will be. But
somebody said if you ever feel like you don't need to try anymore, then
you're dead.
You're dead. Give up.
Basically, yeah. It's always a work in progress, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. Well, that was an hour and a half that flew by.
Oh Jesus! I'm so sorry we took up so much of your time.
Laura.
Thank you for having me.
You are bloody awesome. You know that.
Thank you very much for coming. It's been a real joy.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to see the endeavours that Laura is on, you have your drama therapy. All the links will be in the description below. So please check them out. So we have your drama therapy. We have your new venture.
My new venture, Dance Like Nobody's Watching.
So that's like brand new.
Brand new. People just come. They get to choose what music they want, what genre of music. They just move to the music however they want to for an hour.
Just cut loose, people.
Yeah.
Just get involved.
Just about being authentic.
Don't tell you to cut loose. That means something different for you, doesn't it?
And there was also a link to a Spotify.
Oh, yeah. So me and my friend Daisy have done a Spectrum and Synergy, which is about talking about mum life and the ups and downs of the neurodiverse world, from parents and being mums.
Marvellous. So please check them all out, ladies and gentlemen. So just thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
For being an absolute diamond and being so candid as well. That's what I love about you.
It's really fascinating to listen to everything you said. Thank you so much.
All right, everybody.
Thank you.
Will be back next Tuesday. I think we're back to normal music type streams. So considering every time we try and get a musical guest, they end up being ill. So I think everyone's just...
we should get the hint, shouldn't we?
Yeah, we should do by now. So, but no, I did see John, who was supposed to be in. He did come into work, and I have never seen him look just so exhausted. Bless him. So he's still recovering. But thank you again, Laura, and take care, everyone.
Bye.
Much love. Tatty bye now. Bye-bye.